Okay, so Fallout, the Berlin Wall. Mother, go away. It's Sunday. It was early on the morning of August 13th, and Harry Siddell was sleeping, or trying to, in the East Berlin apartment he shared with his mother, wife, and baby son. Harry's mother shook his shoulder again. You must get up. They've closed the frontier. They've what? He shot out of bed and ran to the radio. It was true. The East Berlin police were blocking the border to West Berlin. It had to be done, the government claimed, to protect the citizens of East from the evil capitalists of the West. Chadell threw on his riding clothes and rolled his racing bike to the front door. Where are you going, Harry? Asked Ratoff, his wife. To think, he said, and to look. Harry Slidell got on his bike and he pedaled towards the border. Just 2 years before, he'd been one of the top youth cyclists in East Germany. The government paid him to train and race and preparing him for the 1960s Olympics in Rome. But when pressed by officials, he refused to take steroids on or to join the Communist Party. The training money evaporated. Siddell took a job delivering morning newspapers in West Berlin. He was one of about 80,000 East Berliners who crossed the border each day for work, though that would not be possible now. As he rode through the city on this warm summer morning, Siddell saw Soviet made tanks blocking intersections. He watched soldiers and police unrolling barbed wire fences across streets connecting East and West Berlin. In an instant, the barrier separated people from their schools and jobs, their friends and family. Siddell saw a man in the west with tears in his eyes, staring through barbed wire at his 2-year-old boy holding the hand of an old woman in East. Please, the man kept saying. Please do something. It's my son. The West Berlin police could do nothing, but maybe Harry Siddell could. John Kennedy was sailing off the coast of Cape Cod when he got the news from Berlin. He hurried back to shore and he called the White House from his family's vacation home. The president's worst fear was that the Soviets and the East Germans were seizing West Berlin, in which case he'd only have minutes to decide whether or not to respond with nuclear bombs. But that did not seem to be the case. He was relieved. It's not a very nice solution, Kennedy said, but a wall is a heck of a lot better than a war. Thousands of East Berliners lined the borders, some just curious, some throwing stones over the barbed wire at East German police, taunting them with insults. Pigs! Nazis! The police fired back with canisters of tear gas. U.S. Army helicopters hovered overhead just watching. The fence was on East Germany territory. Short of invasion, there wasn't much America could actually do. In some spots, apartment buildings lined the border between East and West, and some people jumped out windows in the East and landed in the West. When East German police began boarding up lower story windows facing the West, people climbed to higher floors. West Berlin firefighters raced to the scene and held out nets to catch people as they jumped to freedom. Ida Seichmann, a 59-year-old nurse, died after leaping from the third-story window, becoming the first person to die attempting to escape from East Berlin. The first to be killed by police was a 24-year-old tailor named Gunter Liffen, who jumped fully clothed into Berlin's Spree River and tried to swim across the river separating East and West. East German police on the bridge opened fire. Litvin raised his hands in surrender. The police shot him through the neck. Then they went to his mother's apartment and trashed the place, tossing clothes from drawers, slicing open mattresses, smashing appliances. Your son has been shot dead, they told her. He was a criminal. In the days after August 13th, the East Germans fortified the border with watchtowers and brought floodlights, just like a prison. They began replacing the barbed wire fence with permanent slabs of concrete. Nikita Crenshaw was pleased with the way things were working out. Kennedy had sent 1,500 more U.S. troops into West Berlin, but the German leaders saw that for what it was, a symbolic show of support for the West. The Soviets moved in more troops and tanks, and nothing happened. For all his big talk about supporting freedom, Kennedy did not seem eager to fight in Berlin. To use the language of chess, Crenshaw said of one of these maneuvers, the Americans have advanced a pawn, so we protected our position by moving a knight. The Soviets' position, Crenshaw concluded, was stronger than ever, and he saw an important lesson here. The American president, in times of crisis, could be forced to back down. But almost immediately, the Berlin Wall began to backfire on Crenshaw, thanks to people like Harry Siddell. Few nights after the wall went up, Siddell found an unlit spot along the banks of the Spree. He pulled in a deep breath and dove in. The river here was 200 yards wide. He swam silently beneath the surface, coming up for air halfway across, and nearly hitting his head on an East German police boat. The boat's searchlight swept across the empty black water. Over the sound of the boat's chugging motor, Siddell heard one of the officers say, "Let's go, nothing to see here." Siddell slipped under the water and made it across to the west. He'd promised Rota he'd find a way to get her and their baby across. He got right to work, watching the East German guards, learning their schedules and routines, and looking for soft spots. The border around West Berlin was nearly 100 miles long. The East Germans were building walls across the most heavily populated areas, but stuck their fences in other places. Two fences, usually, with a wide patch of empty ground between the two. The death strip, as it became known. Anyway, anyone caught in this no man's land would be shot on sight. Siddell picked a remote section of fencing. He waited for guards to take a dinner break, and then he crept forward and he clipped the first wire, crawled under the death strip, clipped the second fence, and wiggled back into East Berlin. He hurried down a dark road to a nearby cafe, hoping to use the payphone to call his wife. A bunch of off-duty East German police were drinking beer at the bar. "Hello, comrade," called one to Siddell. "Been digging a ditch?" Henry looked down at his muddy clothes, an obvious flaw in his plan. "Been stuck under my truck for the past 2 hours," he improvised. "Where's the truck now? I didn't hear you arrive." "Still there, stuck," he said, pointing down the road. 2 hours, and I can't get the squeak out of it." "What do you do then?" "Have a schnapps," Harry said, "and then call a tow truck." "Best of luck," the policeman said. Harry bought a drink and went to the phone and dialed. His wife picked up. "Get ready quick," he said. "I'm coming for you." Rhoda crunched up a sleeping pill, put some of the powder into a bottle, and fed it to her baby son, Andre. She pulled on black pants and a black sweater and tied a black scarf over her blonde hair. Harry met Rhoda at their apartment building. He led the way back to the spot where he'd cut the barbed wire. Hearing the sounds of motorcycles approaching, they flattened themselves against the wall of an abandoned cottage. Andre's eyes were wide open, but he was fast asleep. The police drove slowly past. "Let's go," Harry whispered. They sprinted to the wire. Rhoda crawled through. Harry handed her the baby, then followed. They dashed across the death strip under the second wire and ran 100 yards into West Berlin before daring to stop. On August 30th, Nikita Crenshaw announced to the world that the Soviet government had decided, with a heavy heart, to resume nuclear tests. Crenshaw has always blamed the Americans. The United States and its allies are spinning the flywheel of their military machine ever faster, charged the official Soviet statement, fanning up the arms race to unprecedented scope, increasing the strength of armies, making the tension of the international situation red hot. The Soviets had been caught unprepared by Hitler in World War II. Like 20 years ago, the statement continued, ominous clouds of war are once again ever changing, ever hanging and approaching to our motherland. This time the Soviet Union was ready. Soviet scientists were designing new super bombs, more powerful than anything ever tested, and they had rockets, as Yuri Gagarin's flight showed the world, to deliver these bombs to any spot on the globe. "Effed again," John Kennedy said to his brother when he heard the news. Hadn't Crenshaw promised in Vienna that the Soviets would not be the first to restart nuclear testing? I want to get off, Kennedy said. Get off what? Get off the planet, Bobby said. In a secret lab in the Ural Mountains, Soviet physicist Andrei Sakharov of and his team devised a new kind of nuclear bomb. They named it Big Ivan. Its yields, they calculated, would be in the range of 100 megatons. A 100 megaton bomb would create a fireball larger than the state of Maryland.